Elias had always loved the ranch. He had spent most of his life there, walking the fields his grandfather had once tended, hearing the wind whistle through the old barns, and watching the sunsets paint the sky in colors he could never describe the same way twice. But over the last few years, the ranch had become a shadow of what it once was. Droughts had cracked the soil, cattle had grown fewer, and the crops that had once thrived seemed to wither before they could grow. Neighbors would drive by, shaking their heads and muttering about the wasted land, calling it ruined. Even Elias's friends had stopped visiting as often, unsure why he continued to pour his energy into something that seemed hopeless. Yet he could not leave. The ranch had been part of him for as long as he could remember, and the idea of abandoning it felt like abandoning a piece of his soul. Every morning, Elias woke up early, often before the sun had fully risen. He would put on his worn boots, grab his hat, and step out into the crisp air. The smell of dry earth mixed with the faint scent of hay and old wood filled him with a strange comfort. Some days were harder than others. Some days, when the wind blew fiercely across the fields, it felt as though the land itself was whispering that he should give up. But Elias was stubborn. He had learned long ago that nothing worth keeping came easily, and the ranch had always been worth it. One morning, after a night of restless sleep, Elias decided to tackle the overgrown barnyard behind the old storage shed. He had avoided it for months because the weeds had grown so high that it looked like a small jungle, but the idea of leaving it for another year made him uneasy. He wanted to see what lay beneath, what the land might still hold. As he hacked through the weeds with his machete, he noticed something unusual. The sun caught on a piece of metal, glinting faintly amid the brown and green of the overgrowth. Curious, he knelt down and brushed the dirt away. It was a small, rusted corner of a metal container, buried just enough to remain hidden over the years. At first, Elias thought it might be some old piece of farm equipment that had been left behind. But as he examined it more closely, he realized it was something much larger. The metal was thick, and the container seemed to extend farther beneath the soil than he could see. His heart began to beat faster. For a moment, he imagined all kinds of possibilities. Could it be a forgotten storage unit from decades ago? Perhaps something someone had buried and never retrieved? He had heard stories from older farmers in town about things hidden in fields, but he had never believed them. Now, staring at the rusty metal, he felt a spark of hope mixed with cautious excitement. Elias grabbed his shovel and began to dig carefully around the exposed edge. The dirt was hard and dry, sticking stubbornly to the blade. Hours passed as he worked, sweat pouring down his face, dirt under his nails, muscles aching. Still, he continued, driven by a mixture of determination and curiosity. By midday, he had uncovered more of the container, enough to see that it was large and rectangular, clearly designed to hold something substantial. He paused for a moment, wiping his brow and stepping back to look at his work. The container had been hidden well, almost perfectly camouflaged by the earth and weeds over the years. Elias knew he had to be careful. He didn't want to damage whatever was inside. The container was old, rusted, and fragile in places, and he had no idea what he might find. He fetched a crowbar from the shed and began to work on the lid, prying it open slowly. The metal groaned under the pressure, but eventually it began to give way. A small gap appeared, and Elias peered inside. The sight took his breath away. Inside were stacks of old crates, wooden boxes, and even some bundles wrapped in cloth. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of old wood and metal filled his nose. He could hardly believe his eyes. The ranch, which had seemed so barren and empty, had been hiding a secret for who knew how long. Elias spent the rest of the afternoon cautiously examining the contents. The crates were covered in layers of dust and cobwebs, and some had been slightly damaged by the the next morning. Elias returned to the container with a renewed sense of purpose. The early light cast long shadows across the cracked soil, and the air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of earth and dry grass. He brought tools this time, a small hammer, gloves, and a soft brush, determined to explore the contents carefully without causing damage. Each crate seemed to carry a story, and he did not want to lose a single detail. The first box he opened was filled with old farming tools. Some were familiar, items he had used in his own work, while others were strange and intricate, fashioned in a style he had never seen before. The craftsmanship was remarkable, and he marveled at how well the tools had held up under the soil for so many years. Elias took each tool in his hands, feeling the weight and imagining the people who had used them. He thought of the hands that had sharpened the blades, driven the nails, and dug the soil. There was something intimate in holding an object that had been part of someone else's daily life so long ago. He carefully placed the tools on a large piece of cloth, arranging them methodically. The rust could be cleaned later, but for now he wanted to preserve the order in which they had been stored. Each item felt like a bridge to the past, connecting him to the history of the land and the people who had once called it home. Next, he moved on to the crates filled with papers. These were delicate and brittle, and Elias handled them with utmost care. The documents included handwritten ledgers, letters, and notes about planting cycles, rainfall, and livestock care. Some letters were personal, mentioning birthdays, weddings, and the daily struggles of running a farm. Elias could feel the emotions behind the words, the pride, the worry, the joy, and the hardship. One letter in particular described a harsh winter that had wiped out a herd of cows, yet ended with hope for the coming spring. Elias read it twice, struck by the resilience and determination of the people who had lived on this land before him. Hours passed as he continued to examine the documents. He found old maps showing parts of the ranch that had long been abandoned. There were indications of irrigation channels, orchards, and hidden wells. Some areas had been left fallow for decades, but the maps suggested they had once been fertile and productive. Elias felt a sense of amazement. The ranch had not always been dry and barren. It had once thrived. He wondered how much of the old knowledge could be used again. Perhaps there were sections of the land that could be restored if only he knew how to find them. While sorting through the boxes, Elias discovered small bundles wrapped in cloth. Carefully untying them, he revealed coins and pieces of old jewelry. The coins were tarnished but intact, with intricate designs and markings from decades past. The jewelry was delicate and ornate, showing a level of craftsmanship he had rarely seen. Elias was cautious not to let greed cloud his judgment. These items were valuable, yes, but they were also pieces of history. They represented people who had cared for the ranch, who had hidden their treasures in a place they trusted. He set them aside, planning to have them examined and preserved properly. As the day went on, Elias realized he was uncovering more than just physical items. Each crate and box was a story, a piece of the ranch's past that had been carefully stored away. He imagined the lives of those who had buried these things, a family trying to protect their belongings during uncertain times, or perhaps a farmer hoping to return for them someday. The thought filled him with a sense of connection to the generations that had worked this land before him. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive with history, rather than empty and desolate. Elias decided to take a break and walked out to the fields, looking at the sun dipping lower in the sky. The land looked different now. It seemed to hum with potential, as if the discoveries in the container had awakened something dormant. He thought about the irrigation channels on the old maps, the fertile spots that had been overlooked, and the lessons embedded in the letters and ledgers. He began to see the ranch not as a failed property, but as a place with layers of hidden opportunities waiting to be explored. When he returned to the container, Elias focused on a particularly large crate he had not yet opened. It was heavy and the wood had darkened with age. With effort, he pried it open and found more tools, papers, and a bundle wrapped in canvas. Inside the bundle were photographs, black and white, capturing life on the ranch many decades earlier. He saw people working in the fields, children playing near the barn, and celebrations that had taken place on the property. The images were vivid in their simplicity, showing daily life with an honesty that touched Elias deeply. He traced the faces with his fingers, imagining the stories behind each one. The next morning, Elias returned to the container with a sense of excitement he had not felt in years. He had spent the previous day carefully sorting through the crates and documents, and now he was eager to see what other secrets the ranch might reveal. The early light bathed the fields in a soft gold, and the air smelled faintly of dry grass and earth, carrying the quiet promise of discovery. Elias brought more tools this time, including a small flashlight, extra brushes, and gloves, determined to handle each item with care. He knew the contents could be fragile, and he did not want to risk damaging any part of the hidden history. He started by examining a large crate that had been partially exposed the day before. With careful movements, he pried open the lid and shone his flashlight inside. To his surprise, the crate contained more than just tools or papers. There were boxes within boxes, some labeled with faded handwriting that indicated dates from decades past. Elias pulled out one of the inner boxes and opened it to reveal a collection of objects that seemed almost personal. Small trinkets, old coins, and a few pieces of jewelry lay neatly inside, each one wrapped in cloth. He handled each item with care, marveling at the intricate craftsmanship and imagining the hands that had once owned them. The coins were worn, but their designs were still visible, telling stories of a time long before Elias had been born. As he sorted through the contents, Elias found more documents tucked into the crates. Some were ledgers with detailed notes about crop yields, weather patterns, and livestock health. Others were letters, some personal and heartfelt, describing daily life, challenges, and celebrations. One letter in particular caught his attention. It was addressed to a family member and described a difficult winter that had nearly destroyed the farm. Despite the hardships, the writer expressed hope for the future and a determination to keep working the land. Elias read it twice, struck by the resilience and optimism it contained. It reminded him that the ranch had always been more than just soil and fences. It was a place of hard work, perseverance, and hope. Elias spent hours examining the photographs he had discovered earlier. The black and white images captured life on the ranch many decades ago. He saw people working in the fields, tending to animals, and celebrating small victories. There were children playing near the barn, women mending clothes, and men repairing fences. Each photograph seemed to tell a story, revealing the daily rhythms and the challenges of life on the ranch. Elias felt a deep connection to these images, as if he could reach out and touch the past. He carefully laid the photographs on a clean cloth, arranging them in chronological order as best he could. It was a slow process, but one that brought him a sense of fulfillment and wonder. While handling the documents, Elias came across an old map. The edges were frayed, and the ink had faded in places, but it clearly showed sections of the ranch that he had long neglected. There were markings for irrigation channels, orchards, and areas that had been left fallow. Elias traced the lines with his finger, imagining the land as it had once been, fertile, productive, and full of life. He realized that there were opportunities hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice them. Perhaps with careful planning, he could restore these areas, bringing life back to parts of the ranch that had been abandoned for years. As the morning turned into afternoon, Elias discovered something that surprised him even more. Tucked away in the corner of one of the crates was a small locked box. The lock had rusted over time, but it was still intact. Elias carefully pried it open and found a collection of coins and silver jewelry, each piece remarkably well preserved. The coins were from different eras, some minted decades before he was born, and the jewelry was delicate, with intricate designs that spoke of a skilled artisan. Elias felt a mix of awe and curiosity. These items were valuable, yes, but they were also a tangible connection to the past. They told a story of a family that had lived, worked, and dreamed on this land, hiding their treasures with care and trust. As he continued to explore, Elias realized that the ranch held more than just physical objects. Each crate, each box, each document and photograph was a piece of history, a story waiting to be told. The people who had hidden these items had clearly intended to preserve them, and in doing so, they had entrusted Elias with a remarkable responsibility. He felt honored to be the one to uncover these secrets, to bear witness to the lives and experiences of those who had come before him. The ranch was no longer just a plot of land. It was a living archive full of lessons and memories. Elias decided to take a short break and walked out into the fields. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the dry soil. The land looked different now, almost as if it had been transformed by the discoveries in the container. He thought about the irrigation channels on the old map, the fertile areas that had been overlooked, and the knowledge embedded in the letters and ledgers. The ranch had been thought ruined, but Elias could see its potential. With care, patience, and dedication, he could breathe new life into the land, restoring not only its productivity but also its history. Returning to the container, Elias focused on a particularly large crate he had not yet opened. It was heavy and worn, the wood darkened with age. With effort, he pried it open and discovered more tools, papers, and a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside the bundle were additional photographs, showing scenes of celebrations, work, and daily life on the ranch. The images were vivid and detailed, offering glimpses into a past that seemed both distant and familiar. Elias carefully examined each photograph, imagining the lives of the people in them, their struggles and their joys. He felt a deep sense of connection, as if the ranch itself was speaking to him, revealing its stories one piece at a time. As the day wore on, Elias realized that he had barely scratched the surface of the container's contents. There were still crates to explore, boxes to open, and documents to read. Each discovery was more fascinating than the last, and he felt a sense of anticipation for what might come next. The ranch, which had seemed lifeless and abandoned, was now full of possibility and promise. It was a place where history and present-day life intersected, offering lessons and inspiration for anyone willing to look closely. When evening approached, Elias took a moment to organize the items he had uncovered. He arranged the tools, documents, and photographs carefully, treating each item with respect and care. The process was slow, but it allowed him to appreciate the value of what he had found. He thought about how he might share these discoveries with others, perhaps with historians or a local museum. But for now, he wanted to understand the ranch and its history himself. The act of discovery was its own reward, filling him with a sense of purpose and connection. Night fell, and Elias reluctantly closed the container for the day. He covered it with the soil he had removed, planning to continue the work the next morning. As he walked back to the farmhouse, the sky was painted in deep shades of red and purple, and the air was cool and still. He felt a sense of wonder and anticipation, knowing that the ranch still held many secrets waiting to be uncovered. The day had been long and exhausting, but it had also been filled with discovery, curiosity, and hope. That night, Elias could hardly sleep. He kept thinking about the photographs, letters, coins, and maps he had found. Each item was a glimpse into a life he had never known, yet now felt connected to in a profound way. The ranch, once thought to be ruined, was full of life and mystery. He imagined the days ahead, the work required to uncover the rest of the container and the stories that might emerge. The thought filled him with energy and determination, a renewed sense of purpose he had not felt in years. Elias drifted to sleep dreaming of the ranch as it had been long ago, filled with activity, people, and life. The container and its contents had become a bridge between past and present, and he felt grateful to be part of the story. The ranch was no longer just land. It was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of memories, and a source of endless fascination, and Elias knew that the discoveries he had made were only the beginning of a journey that would change his life and the future of the ranch forever. The more Elias uncovered, the more he realized how much care had gone into hiding these items. Everything had been preserved deliberately, as if the following morning Elias returned to the container with a mix of anticipation and determination. The ranch was quiet, except for the faint rustling of dry grass in the breeze and the occasional call of a distant bird. The air carried a soft chill, hinting at the coming change of seasons. Elias set down his tools and gloves, taking a deep breath before he knelt by the container. He knew that much of the treasure within remained unexplored, and he felt a strong urge to uncover every secret that the land had kept hidden for so long. He started with a large crate that had remained untouched. The wood creaked as he opened it, revealing a mix of old equipment and wrapped bundles. Each bundle was tied with cloth and string, showing that whoever had packed them had taken great care. Elias untied the first bundle and found a series of letters and notes, each carefully folded and preserved. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, a window into the thoughts and emotions of the people who had lived on this ranch many decades before. Some letters described the joys of a good harvest, while others spoke of hardships, illnesses, and struggles to keep the farm running. Elias read them slowly, savoring every word, imagining the people who had written them and feeling a deep connection to their lives. As he continued, Elias found photographs tucked between the bundles. They were black and white, slightly curled at the edges, but the images were clear. He saw families working together in the fields, children playing near the barn, and scenes of small celebrations and gatherings. One photograph showed a woman carrying a basket of produce with a proud smile, while another captured a man repairing a fence with focused determination. Elias felt a profound sense of history and continuity. The ranch had not just been land, it had been alive with people, work, and life, and now he had the rare privilege of seeing it through the eyes of those who had come before him. Moving carefully, Elias uncovered more crates that contained tools and farming implements. Some were familiar, the same kind he had used in his own work, while others were unusual with designs and mechanisms he had never seen. Despite their age, the tools were remarkably well preserved, likely because of the careful storage and the protection of the buried container. Elias handled each tool with respect, imagining how it had been used, the hands that had wielded it and the work that had been done with it. There was something almost sacred in touching objects that had been part of someone else's daily life so long ago. Hours passed as he continued to explore the container. He found bundles of coins and jewelry, each piece unique and intriguing. The coins were tarnished but still showed intricate designs, while the jewelry revealed careful craftsmanship, delicate patterns, and details that spoke of both value and sentiment. Elias placed them carefully in separate boxes, planning to have them examined by experts later. The coins and jewelry were fascinating, but Elias realized they were more than just valuable objects. They were symbols of the trust and care of the people who had lived and worked on this land. They had hidden their treasures with the hope that someone would one day find them, someone who would understand and respect the past. While sorting through the papers and objects, Elias discovered an old journal. The leather cover was cracked and worn, and the pages inside were yellowed and delicate. As he opened it, he found detailed accounts of the day-to-day life on the ranch. The writer described planting schedules, crop rotations, rainfall, and livestock care. But beyond the practical details, there were reflections on life, hope, and the future. The journal gave Elias insight into the mind of someone who had worked tirelessly to maintain the ranch and who had dreamed of its success. He read carefully, absorbing the knowledge and wisdom embedded in the words. The journal became a guide of sorts, helping Elias see the land not just as soil and fences, but as a living, breathing entity with potential and value. As the afternoon wore on, Elias felt a growing sense of purpose. The ranch that had once seemed ruined was now a treasure trove of history, knowledge, and inspiration. Each crate, each letter, each tool and photograph was a piece of a larger puzzle, revealing the story of the people who had worked this land and the life that had existed here. Elias began to make plans for how he could use the information and objects he had discovered. Perhaps he could restore some of the old orchards or irrigation channels indicated on the maps. Maybe he could recreate some of the farming techniques described in the journals to improve the productivity of the land. The possibilities seemed endless, and the hope that had been dormant in him for years began to blossom anew. Toward the end of the day, Elias uncovered one final bundle in the container. It contained a mix of photographs, letters, and small mementos, carefully wrapped and preserved. He spread everything out on a clean cloth and studied it. The photographs showed family gatherings, work days in the fields, and celebrations that had taken place on the ranch. The letters spoke of love, loss, hope, and perseverance. The mementos were personal items, small tokens of memory and affection. Elias felt a deep sense of connection to these people who had lived, worked, and dreamed on the same land he now cared for. It was as if the ranch itself was telling him its story, and he was honored to be the one to listen. As evening approached, Elias carefully packed away the items he had examined, ensuring that each was protected and preserved. He covered the container with the soil he had removed, planning to continue the exploration the next day. The ranch was quiet, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, and Elias felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The land had revealed some of its secrets, and in doing so had given him hope, purpose, and a renewed connection to history. That night, Elias sat on the porch of his farmhouse reflecting on the day's discoveries. He thought about the letters, the photographs, the coins, and the tools, and about the lives of the people who had lived and worked on the ranch long before him. He felt grateful to have uncovered these treasures, not just for their historical value, but for the connection they provided to a past that was both distant and deeply personal. The ranch had been called ruined, but Elias now knew that it had simply been waiting for someone patient and persistent enough to uncover its hidden treasures. As he drifted off to sleep, Elias dreamed of the ranch in its former glory. He saw the fields green and fertile, the barns full of life, and the families working together in harmony. The container and its contents had become a bridge between past and present, and he felt honored to be part of that story. The ranch was no longer just a piece of land. It was a keeper of memories, a guardian of history, and a source of inspiration and hope. And Elias knew that the discoveries he had made were only the beginning of a journey that would transform not just the land, but his life as well. Previous owners had known that someone someday would find them. It was a kind of trust passed across generations. The ranch had not simply been abandoned, it had been protected, its secrets safe under layers of soil and time. Elias felt honored to be the one to uncover them, to witness the legacy that had been the following morning. Elias awoke with a renewed sense of excitement. The discoveries in the container had changed the way he looked at the ranch, and he felt a deep determination to see the project through to the end. As he stepped outside, the fields stretched before him, bathed in soft sunlight, and for the first time in years, the land seemed alive with possibility. Elias packed his tools and headed toward the container, ready to continue the exploration that had already revealed so many hidden treasures. He began by carefully reviewing the remaining crates and boxes. Each one seemed to hold its own surprises. There were more tools, carefully crafted and preserved, each one a reminder of the skill and dedication of the ranch's previous inhabitants. There were additional letters filled with stories of daily life, joys, and hardships. And there were photographs capturing moments of celebration and work, showing families who had labored on the land, built homes, and raised children. Elias felt a profound connection to these objects, as if they were speaking directly to him across the years. Among the remaining crates, Elias discovered several bundles that contained unusual items. Some were small, intricately carved wooden figures, while others were handmade quilts, folded neatly and still vibrant in color despite the decades. The attention to detail and care with which these items had been preserved impressed him. He could imagine the hands that had created them, the love and pride that had gone into their making. Elias handled each item carefully, feeling the weight of history and the importance of preserving it. As he worked, Elias began to notice patterns in the materials he was uncovering. The letters often mentioned specific sections of the ranch, noting areas that were fertile, areas that had been used for particular crops, and places where livestock had thrived. The photographs showed people working in these same areas, reinforcing the observations from the letters. Elias realized that by studying these materials carefully, he could gain valuable insights into how to restore and improve the ranch. The past was offering him guidance, a roadmap to bring life back to the land that had once been called ruined. While examining a crate near the back of the container, Elias came across a small metal box that had been carefully sealed. Inside were several coins and pieces of silver jewelry. The coins were from different decades, each one telling a story of the economy and craftsmanship of its time. The jewelry was delicate with intricate patterns and small gemstones. Elias was careful not to touch them too roughly, knowing that these items were not only valuable but also fragile. As he inspected each piece, he felt a deep sense of respect for the people who had hidden them, preserving them for future generations. It was clear that the ranch had been more than just a place to work. It had been a home, a treasure trove of memories, and a symbol of hope and perseverance. As the hours passed, Elias continued to sort through the remaining boxes, gradually uncovering the full extent of the treasures hidden within the container. He found journals that recorded the day-to-day life on the ranch, including details about planting schedules, weather patterns, and livestock management. These journals offered a wealth of knowledge, not only about the history of the ranch but also about sustainable farming practices that could be applied today. Elias felt inspired by the wisdom contained in these pages, and he made notes about how he could implement some of the techniques to improve the land's productivity. In addition to the practical knowledge, Elias found letters that revealed the emotions and relationships of the families who had lived on the ranch. Some letters spoke of love and support, others of loss and hardship. Reading them, Elias felt a deep empathy for the people who had faced challenges similar to those he encountered in his own life. The letters reminded him that the ranch had always been a place of resilience and determination, a place where people had struggled, dreamed, and persevered. Elias also discovered photographs that captured moments of joy and celebration. There were images of families gathered around tables, children playing in the fields, and community events on the ranch. These photographs gave him a sense of the human spirit that had thrived on the land, despite the hardships and difficulties. Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. realizing that his work was not just about restoring the land but also about honoring the people who had built and cared for it before him. As evening approached, Elias stepped back to take in the container and its contents. He had spent weeks uncovering the treasures hidden within, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. The ranch, once considered ruined, was now full of history, knowledge, and inspiration. Elias realized that he had not only uncovered physical objects but also a connection to the past, a sense of continuity that spanned generations. The land itself seemed to hum with life, as if it recognized the care and attention he had given it. Elias decided to begin planning how he would use the knowledge and resources he had uncovered. The old maps and journals provided valuable guidance for restoring the ranch, identifying areas that could be replanted, irrigation channels that could be repaired, and livestock strategies that could be improved. The photographs and letters offered a glimpse into the lives of the people who had lived there, providing inspiration for how to create a thriving, sustainable environment. Elias felt confident that with careful planning and dedication, he could transform the ranch into a productive and beautiful place once again. Over the next few days, Elias began to implement some of the changes suggested by the old documents. He repaired fences, cleared overgrown areas, and tested the soil in different sections of the ranch. He planted new crops in the areas indicated as fertile on the maps and began restoring the orchards that had once flourished. Each small success gave him motivation and hope, reinforcing the idea that the ranch was not ruined, but merely waiting for someone to uncover its potential. Word of Elias's discoveries and the work he was doing began to spread in the nearby community. Local historians and neighbors visited the ranch, curious to see the treasures and learn about the history Elias had uncovered. They were amazed by the letters, photographs, tools, and coins, and they offered support and advice for the restoration efforts. Elias felt a sense of pride and connection, knowing that the ranch was becoming a source of inspiration and education for others. The land that had been overlooked and forgotten was now a place of learning, history, and community. As the weeks turned into months, the ranch began to transform. Crops grew in the fertile areas, trees blossomed in the orchards, and livestock thrived in the restored pastures. Elias continued to uncover more items from the container, each discovery adding to his understanding of the ranch's history and potential. The land once considered ruined had become a symbol of perseverance, hope, and renewal. Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had honored the legacy of those who had come before him while creating a bright future for the ranch. In the evenings, Elias often sat on the porch of his farmhouse, reflecting on the journey he had taken. He thought about the people who had lived and worked on the ranch long ago, the letters and photographs that had given him insight into their lives, and the tools and coins that had survived the passage of time. He felt grateful for the opportunity to connect with the past and to restore the land to its former glory. The ranch was no longer just a plot of soil and fences. It was a living testament to resilience, history, and the power of discovery. Elias knew that the journey was far from over. There were still parts of the ranch to explore, new projects to undertake, and more stories to uncover. But he faced the future with confidence and determination, inspired by the knowledge and treasures he had uncovered. The ranch, once thought lost, had become a place of hope, learning, and renewal, and Elias was proud to be its caretaker. He understood that the true value of the discovery was not in the objects themselves, but in the connection to history, the lessons learned, and the sense of purpose it had given him. As he drifted to sleep each night, Elias dreamed of the ranch in its full vitality. He imagined the fields green and productive, the orchards full of fruit, and the barns bustling with life. The container and its contents had opened a door to the past, and through it, Elias had found a path to a brighter future. The ranch was no longer ruined. It was alive, thriving, and full of promise, and Elias knew that he had been given a rare gift: the chance to uncover the secrets of the land, honor the legacy of those who had come before, and create a future filled with hope, purpose, and endless possibilities, and hidden from view for so long. As evening approached, Elias sat back and took in the work he had done that day. He had barely scratched the surface of the container's contents, but what he had found so far was remarkable. The ranch, which had seemed lifeless and ruined, was full of history, full of stories, and full of possibilities.
He realized that his work was not just about farming or restoring the land.
It was about connecting with the past, preserving it, and learning from it. He spent some time organizing the items he had uncovered, laying out tools, documents, and photographs in neat piles. Each item felt precious, and he handled them with care and respect. He thought about how he might share these discoveries with others in the future. Perhaps local historians or a museum would be interested, but for now he wanted to understand the ranch and its history himself. The process of discovery was its own reward, and Elias felt a sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for years. Night fell, and Elias reluctantly closed the container for the day. He covered it with the soil he had removed, planning to continue the work the next morning. As he walked back to the farmhouse, the sky was painted with deep reds and purples, the air still and quiet. He felt a strange sense of anticipation, as though the ranch itself was waiting for him to uncover more of its secrets. The day had been long and exhausting, but it had also been filled with wonder, curiosity, and hope. That night, Elias could hardly sleep. He kept thinking about the photographs, the letters, the coins, and the maps. Each piece was a glimpse into a life he had never known, yet now felt connected to in a profound way. The ranch, which had once seemed hopeless, was suddenly full of life and mystery. He imagined the days ahead, the work required to uncover the rest of the container and the stories that might emerge. The thought filled him with energy and determination. Elias drifted to sleep with a smile, dreaming of the ranch as it had been decades ago, filled with people, animals, and activity. The container and its contents had become a bridge between past and present, and he felt grateful to be part of the story. The ranch was no longer just a piece of land. It was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of memories, and a source of endless fascination, and Elias knew, deep in his heart, that the discovery he had made was only the beginning of a journey that would change his life and the future of the ranch forever. Years, but they still held together. He carefully opened one of the smaller boxes and found old tools, still in surprisingly good condition, their edges rusted but usable. Another box contained stacks of papers yellowed with age, tied together with frayed string, letters, he realized, and perhaps farm records, judging by the neat handwriting and numbers scattered across the pages. Every crate and box seemed to tell a story, whispering fragments of a past life that had been carefully preserved beneath the soil. As he worked, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to the people who had hidden these things so many years ago. Who were they? Why had they chosen to bury their belongings rather than store them in the barn or sell them? He had no answers, only questions and a growing sense of wonder. The ranch he had thought was ruined was suddenly alive with possibility. The land had kept its secrets for decades, waiting for someone patient and persistent enough to uncover them. By the time the sun began to set, Elias had cleared enough of the container to see that it was larger than he had imagined. There were more crates and bundles than he could examine in a single day. He stepped back, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The ranch had always demanded hard work, but today it had given him something unexpected, a glimpse into a hidden history and a spark of hope that he hadn't felt in years. That night, Elias sat on the porch of his small farmhouse, looking out over the fields that seemed less dry and empty in the fading light. He thought about the container and all that it might hold. Perhaps they were valuable items, perhaps just memories and tools, but the thought of discovery filled him with energy he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized that the ranch was more than land and livestock. It was a keeper of stories, a guardian of history, and he had been given the chance to uncover one of its secrets. Elias went to bed that night with plans forming in his mind. Tomorrow he would continue to uncover the rest of the container. He would carefully examine each crate and bundle, cataloging everything and trying to piece together the story of the people who had hidden these items. He didn't know what he would find, and he didn't care about the value or money. What mattered was the connection, the discovery, and the sense that the ranch still had life and purpose. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of excitement,